We will fight them on the beaches. We will never surrender. Not one of my best impersonations, but as you may know, tomorrow is the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, VE Day. And it's a day when years of carnage and destruction came to an end and millions of people took to the streets to celebrate peace and to hope for a better future. And as with every anniversary, this 75th anniversary provides us with an opportunity to reflect again on the enormous sacrifice, courage and determination shown by people from all walks of life that saw us through that dark and terrifying period of time. Many of us living today may have a personal memory of a family member or a friend who has been lost through war or has experienced war, while for some it may be an inherited memory which has been passed on from one generation to another. For if we look throughout human history, we'll see there has hardly ever been a time when some kind of conflict has not been ongoing. And therefore it came as no surprise to me when a few years ago a survey was done by a tabloid newspaper in which its readers were asked, what is the one question you would ask God if you could? And the question that came top of the list was, why is there war? And this is a fair question, for when we read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, we're often confronted with stories of conflict and war, where the writers describe how God's people claim to have been inspired and led into victorious battle against their enemies by God. And also in contrast, in Old Testament books like Micah, written about 700 years before Christ, we also read about a future of hope, about a time when war will be no more and that nations will come together in peace. And although Micah's words were written at a time and a backdrop of violence and war, he never lost faith for the future, and he believed that his vision of peace would one day become a reality. And in the New Testament we get a closer glimpse of how Micah's vision would come to fruition with the coming of Jesus, who we often forget was born in an occupied land himself, where peace was definitely not on the agenda. And as we know, Jesus' message was completely different to anything that the people had ever heard or seen or been taught before. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." Jesus also said, "You've been taught an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. For I'm giving you a new message, a new commandment. Love one another and offer forgiveness to your enemies. And by all this, people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." Jesus was confirming what God's kingdom is really all about and what it will be like when it comes to full fruition at the appointed time in the future. However, it was partly due to this message that the religious leaders of the day rejected and crucified Jesus. They believed that the Messiah would come and overthrow their enemies through power and force. And unfortunately, as we look throughout history, this is how some world and religious leaders are still trying to change the world today through the use of power and force. So to answer the question raised in the newspaper survey, this is why there is still war and related suffering in the world today. And as a Christian, people may ask us the same question. If there's a God, why is there war? Why doesn't God do something about it? Well, the answer is God could. And God could also make everyone believe in him. But he will never do so, because he would have to use force to do it. For the truth is, the God of Scripture, who has been revealed to us through Jesus, will never use power and force to make us believe in him or to do anything against our will. God created humanity with free will, with the capacity to choose and make decisions for ourselves. Just as our leaders and governments have to make decisions for us as a nation, to pursue what they believe to be the greater good. And unfortunately, whatever our stance is on this issue, this is why on occasions I believe that we as a nation have been justified in joining together with others to take action against evil regimes, such as the one we faced during the Second World War. Although on the other hand, I would have to say that throughout history and in more recent times, the use of force and the reasons for going to war has been anything but justified. And if anything, it's only made matters worse. However, peace is something that has never been an easy thing to achieve. And as we have been reminded in recent years and conflicts, it's something that can be very hard to keep. Yet regardless of the difficulties, as Christians, peace and love must be what we all strive towards and pray for. It's what Micah foresaw and what Jesus taught and commanded us to do. For let us not forget that just as God sent Jesus, Jesus has also sent us, his people, the church, to build God's kingdom in the world. As during times of war, we know there are forces of evil at work in the world. But let us not forget that Jesus has won the victory over the forces of evil on the cross. At the moment, looking at the world, that may not seem to be the case. But let us not forget that during the Second World War, there was the resistance movement in Europe, doing their best to undermine Hitler's forces. And if you were to ask the resistance movement, do you think you can win the battle on your own? They would have said, no way, no way. But they would have gone on to say that we do know that while we are doing what little we can, an invasion force is progressing. And at a time that we do not know, an invasion force will come and join us and lead us to victory. So therefore, as God's people, the church, as we remember Revd, and also as we look at the state of the world, let us not be discouraged. Let us not give up. For through Jesus we have hope, faith and love for the future and for the world that can never be destroyed. Amen.